So just a quick thing before we start the video. Really annoyingly, I just realized that my mic wasn't turned on for the whole recording. Luckily, my camera has its own mic on it, but it doesn't sound too great. But I'm gonna now record me reading out the article stuff, which is very annoying. I have to do this all again. So I apologize for the audio quality for the bits where I'm on camera, but hopefully the rest of the video sounds okay. The Downfall of Milo Yiannopoulos has to be one of the funniest and also biggest falls from grace I've probably ever seen in terms of like the online space, in that if you guys were around in like 2015, 2016, this guy was absolutely everywhere and he generally was getting pretty positive coverage, not just from the right wing who loved him, but also from liberal people like Dave Rubin, when he used to say he was a classical liberal. He was even on Bill Maher 2 times. But now, Milo Yiannopoulos says that he is ex-gay and he essentially only works now for hardcore Catholic organisations who absolutely despise Pope Francis. I wonder why. Now, he talks a lot about being ex-gay and it's very damaging what he says anyway. But he's also like opening conversion therapy centres. So this guy has transitioned from someone who was known for being flamboyant and really basically being the right's token gay conservative. Well, now he's transitioned to a similar role where he's the Catholics and Christians' token reformed gay person. But as we're going to get into in the video, it's kind of pretty hard to believe he's sincere. But in the video, we're going to go through his history, go through the controversy that ended his career, and then look at what he is doing now. Before we get any further, I want to plug my socials and my Patreon for about 1 minute, so skip ahead if you're not interested. Before we get any further, a lot of my work on this channel is demonetized because when you're covering more serious, sometimes edgier topics, YouTube doesn't like this. So if you've ever enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. And you don't have to pledge a crazy amount. I want to build up my Patreon based on as many people as possible pledging little amounts like $1 or $2. So if you feel like I have ever brought anything that's worthwhile into your life and my content, please really consider becoming a patron to help me continue to do this regardless of if YouTube monetize or not most of my videos in a given month. Also, if you want to join our communities, come check out our Discord and my subreddit. Those links in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, please check out the Kavernacle at Twitter, at Instagram, and also my personal Reddit where you can keep up to date with all my content and what I'm doing. Thanks so much for the support recently. For every 5k we get a new chocolate orange. Hopefully this week we actually are going to hit 55k. I honestly don't really have any other goals for 2021. I mean, it would be great if I hit 60k, but I really don't think that's going to happen. And I'm actually moving to Spain in January, and I'm not bringing the chocolate orange pyramid with me, so we're probably going to have to end it with the 55k orange. I also live stream 2 times a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and all of that stuff is archived on the Kavernacle Extra, my second channel. So in terms of my first exposure to Milo Yiannopoulos, and I'm going to get back round to where I first saw him, because the breakup between Dave Rubin and TYT wasn't very on the surface like hostile, a lot of people who used to watch the Young Turks kind of gave Dave Rubin a shot back in 2015. I actually already subscribed to the Rubin Report when it was part of TYT, so I watched a fair few of the original episodes, and that's when I was first exposed to Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, of course, he was very flamboyant and he literally did not care what he said. He was very unfiltered, and I think that's why people liked him to start with. But I remember I immediately didn't like him because of what he was saying about Europe and the refugee crisis and how he frames Gamergate. But we're going to get back to that a bit later because Gamergate is key to his rise. But because we're going in like chronological order, I want to go through his background a bit first. So to start with his background, born as Milo Hanrahan, Yiannopoulos was born and raised in Chatham, Kent, England. His father is of half Greek and half Irish descent. His parents divorced when he was a child. Raised by his mother and her second husband, Yiannopoulos has stated that he did not have a good relationship with his stepfather. He is described as practicing Roman Catholic, but he has also said that he is Jewish. Yiannopoulos states that his maternal grandmother was Jewish As a teenager, Yiannopoulos lived with his paternal grandmother, whose surname he later adopted. Yiannopoulos was educated at Simon Langton Grammar School for Boys in Canterbury, from which he said he was expelled. He attended the University of Manchester but dropped out before graduating. He then read English at Wolfston College, Cambridge, but was sent down, expelled in 2010. After he dropped out of university, Yiannopoulos initially secured a job at the Catholic Herald in 2009. Yiannopoulos then moved to technology journalism with the Daily Telegraph. His Telegraph columnist bio described him in 2009 as one who writes skeptically about Web 2.0 and social media, but enthusiastically about the internet in general. So in 2011, having left the Telegraph, Yiannopoulos co-founded the tech journalism website The Kernel. The more people he insulted, the more attention he got, but his vindictiveness wasn't just an act. In 2013, The Kernel was successfully sued by former editor Jason Hesse for non-payment of wages, and one female staffer publicly complained about similar treatment. In a vicious email, Yiannopoulos threatened to ruin her career. Many profile writers have noted that critics won't speak out on the record for fear of vendettas. Yiannopoulos found his stepping stone to America in Gamergate, an online movement that claimed to campaign for ethics in video games journalism, while subjecting women in the industry to brutal harassment. Unlike older conservatives, Yiannopoulos understood what was bubbling on the platforms such as Reddit and 4chan, a new gamified form of hard-right discourse based not on ideas but on memes, harassment and saying the unsayable, driven by white male resentment to minorities and so-called social justice warriors. It didn't matter he had recently mocked gamers as unemployed saddos living in their parents' basements. For Milo, Gamergate was an exciting new front in the culture wars and the career boost he craved. As an informal movement, Gamergate didn't have a figurehead, so Yiannopoulos gave himself the job and turned into an outlaw anti-hero. Gamergate's activists and opponents both agreed that without his advocacy, the movement would have fizzled out. Profile writers and shows such as Newsnight expanded his celebrity beyond the internet. Young, handsome, charismatic and eloquent, the writer Laura Penny called him a charming devil, one of the worst people I know. So I think there's two things to point out from the introduction to his life and his early career. One, that I have no doubt he has always been like religious to some extent. I know people seem to doubt that, but I do fundamentally believe he has always pretty much stayed Catholic the entire time. It's not surprising he started his career writing for a Catholic paper, but it also shows the inherent contradiction within him in that he both unsurprisingly said like bad things about gamers but then became their champion, because like with all things it seems like Milo throughout his career just jumps on the latest grift and all he really cares about is fame and money and not much else. Like, I believe his politics are far right, but at the same time, I think he's a good actor and he just jumps on whatever opportunity is thrown his way. So I want to get back round to my first exposure to him, and that was on the Rubin report. So I want to go through a couple little segments of the interview and we're going to talk about them, but it will give you a good perspective of why people liked him and what his politics were. So since we were talking about Gamergate already, let's start with Gamergate.
I think we're all used to now the press, in some cases, reporting on things extraordinarily badly. Now, Gamergate has been a huge controversy with people who care about these things because both of those things have come together. It is a consumer movement that rejects sloppy standards in reporting about video games. The second half of it is the social justice warriors we mentioned briefly. There is a sort of insurgent move in video games from a couple of wacky left-wing feminists, and these are sort of far-left, Israel-hating, socialist weirdos. Far-left feminists who say that every video game is problematic, that there is something wrong with all these video games. Now, for some reason, the journalists have sucked all this up and have bought it all. And the same journalists who protected video games when the religious right in the 1980s and 90s said that video games turn kids into killers and violent. Those same journalists nonetheless have rolled over and accepted the feminist critique of video games. This is another chapter in the culture wars, which we're used to from the movies and from books and all the rest of it. So Gamergate, ordinary gamers have put up for 10 years or more with their own press calling them man babies and misogynists, beating up on them basically because it's the trendy thing to do. Because these days, progressivism and sort of hating on men, that's become fashionable. It's become trendy for white guilt, right? White middle class guilt. It's become fashionable for these people to beat up on themselves, prostrate themselves before the altar of womanhood, and say that everything that they are and everything that they do is terrible. I'm so sorry, Mother Gaia, how can I make it up to you?
It's the gaming community that
has risen up because it is tired of being lied about and slandered by its own press. The press that did a really good job of defending it when the violent stuff was going on. When Jack Thompson in the 90s was saying video games can make you violent, the press did a really good job of rebutting him because he was conservative. But when a liberal, when a progressive critic comes along, they fall over themselves to agree and start hating on their own audiences.
Right.
So he liked to frame Gamergate as a backlash to like political correctness and policing opinions and basically like ruining gaming from the gaming press establishment. He talks about Anita Sarkeesian and basically how feminism has become the new, I guess, far-right Christianity of the 1990s and early 2000s in their war against video games. They're basically like recycling these arguments against gamers. It's also pretty clear from this Milo isn't actually someone who plays video games as well, but he was happy enough to do this primarily because it was this popular movement and it was also, a far-right movement generally. And I've made a whole video talking about how Gamergate was completely stupid because it wrongly identified feminism as ruining gaming when it was actually capitalism, and I talked about all this stuff with Anita Sarkeesian as well. But safe to say it was like a white lash against criticism of how games often depicted women and minorities. So next I want to go on to his comments about Islam and the refugee crisis and how this really shows his like far-right leanings pretty clearly.
Europe now, welcoming in millions of people from alien cultures, whilst the establishment refuses to accept that these people's belief systems are just dramatically incompatible with our own. And, the regular citizenry is being lied to. And the problem in Europe is that this stuff is now happening everywhere. No one is safe. Anywhere in Europe. It's happened in Paris, it's happened in London, it's happened in Brussels. No one is safe from this stuff. And we are importing that stuff into Europe in millions. No, I don't make a meaningful distinction between these things because I don't care. I don't see any reason to import these cultures into liberal Western democracies. I see no reason to do it whatsoever. it is incompatible with the modern, free Western liberal democracy we live in. The West that Islam hates so much is what has given us gay rights. It has provided, for women, it's given women the vote. It has ended slavery, which is, not the case everywhere in the world. It has given gay people and women all of the rights we now enjoy. There is effective blanket equality in the West for all of these people.
Yeah, and every other minority, too.
Exactly. Importing Muslims is going to turn the clock back.
So this whole argument about Europe being flooded with illiberal Muslims is something that has not only been parroted by many people on the far right, but also a lot of liberals. Sam Harris has said this as recently as like 2019. It's a very, very popular thing, which is very, very easy to debunk, and I've debunked it a lot myself, but people like Ben Shapiro, Milo, all these people think most Muslims are pretty radical. But my whole argument that undercuts that is people who are refugees don't have political power. They're going to, like, as they say, alien countries and stuff like that. The only thing they care about is survival, maybe getting a job, providing for their family, escaping brutal conditions. They're not some sort of zealots coming to take over the West. They don't care about that stuff. And even when they get to the West, they won't have political power. There's no way they're going to enact massive social change. Even if they did believe in a more conservative form of Islam, they're just fleeing persecution. And I also do love the irony of Milo being involved in movements, talk about like the West and equality, while at the same time being parts of movements that fundamentally do not want like liberal equality like for women or for gay people, for trans people. It's basically an argument used to try and shut down criticism from the left. So one more I wanted to talk about was his views on religion, because I think it's important for the rest of the video, because like I said, I always have believed this guy is Catholic, he is religious to some extent, so let's hear him talk about atheism.
Ari, you acknowledge that there are people...
There are lots of wrong people in the world, and one of the kinds of wrong people are atheists. Now the thing I find fun about atheists, I don't really care if somebody believes in God or not. I hope they do. I wish they did, because I know it'd be quite nice if they joined me up there, in 40 or 50 years.
You think there's something up there?
I've got a first-class ticket, you know.
To up there.
She loves me.
Yeah,
yes.
you know,
I'm very confident
There's
about
nothing
getting...
up there. There's a lighting grid above it. That's it. I mean,
yes, built by men.
Yeah. Fair enough.
No,
but really, I mean,
the reason I have a go at atheists is because it's fun, because they're so thin-skinned. They're like libertarians, or they're like cyclists, or Liberal Democrats in the UK, or you know, any other sort of, or feminists, in fact. You know, so they're so easy to wind up. Oh please!
People would never
Oh
vote for
please! These people aren't
atheists for
victims. These people have some of the most celebrated public intellectuals on their side. Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens. These people have huge public intellectuals on their side. Militant atheism, if you like. Atheism is the trendiest thing in the world. Every journalist is an atheist. Everybody in the media is an atheist. You know, you're never going to get somebody laugh at you or look at you weirdly for announcing you're an atheist, right? Nobody looks at you funny, except me, I'm probably the only person, if you announce that you're an atheist.
Yeah,
so
but
don't tell me they're victims,
no,
because if you know, this is a privileged group in society that I find it funny to take the mickey out of, because they are so touchy.
So basically, like, ridicules atheists and talks about them being some sort of like elite class that no one makes fun of. Now, I don't really believe atheists face much persecution in Western countries, but it is quite funny for a guy who's doing a talk show in America to talk about how being an atheist is like a privileged position, in that the majority of Americans actually won't vote for an atheist for president. Obviously, it depends on what country you're an atheist in, because atheists do legitimately face persecution, especially in religious conservative societies. But again, clearly outlining he believes in God, he's a Catholic, which, you know, I take him at his word. It seems to be like the only consistent thing in his entire career is that he's basically always maintained he is a Catholic, he believes in God, he believes in this religion. Whether or not that religion would actually accept someone like him at this time, of course, I would say most Catholic denominations definitely would not, because he seems to blend the far-rightness of Catholicism in America and, you know, places like Italy and everything like that, with the more liberal Catholicism of places like the UK. I can attest to that. I was raised Catholic in the UK, even went to Catholic school. Very, very liberal and tolerant for what it was. But with his politics, he's pandering to the American Catholic Church, who definitely would not accept him. Despite his flamboyant exterior, he was like deeply involved in the alt-right movement, including personally knowing Richard Spencer, and probably like the only redeeming thing that he ever did was leaking footage of Richard Spencer being deeply racist. But there was a leak that was given to BuzzFeed back in 2016 that really exposed his politics and exposed Breitbart a lot, so I'm going to read you the article.
Milo Yiannopoulos leaks reveal anti-Semitic password and Breitbart's global war. Milo Yiannopoulos, the controversial British media personality who aligned himself with the American alt-right movement, allegedly used passwords with Nazi references and sang karaoke as his audience gave the salutes, according to new leaks published by BuzzFeed. The report alleges that one of the media figure's password began with the word crystal, according to Alam Bukhari, a frequent collaborator who had access to some of his accounts. Kristallnacht, a violent pogrom that took place in Germany in 1938. The report also claimed that in June 2016, Yiannopoulos' email password began Long Knives 1290, a reference to the Night of the Long Knives and the year that Jews were expelled from England. A video from April 2016 shows Yiannopoulos singing the song America the Beautiful on stage at a karaoke bar as onlookers, including self-proclaimed nationalist Richard Spencer, gave salutes.
If you're talking about whether or not he's gay, you're not talking about whether or not he's a white supremacist.
The leaks also revealed an email exchange between former Breitbart tech editor and Steve Bannon, who has now returned to running the website after being in the Trump administration. Bannon warned Yiannopoulos that he was too focused on marginalia, while he should be engaged in the broader culture war, as conceived by the right-wing website and its followers. Describing a global existential war, he warned Yiannopoulos to drop your toys, pick up the tools, and go help save Western civilization. Yiannopoulos acknowledged the message and promised to begin work on a week of Islam, but Bannon told him this was unnecessary and he should just get into the fight.
So he was deeply involved in the modern alt-right. You cannot downplay that. He was writing for Breitbart, stirring up this culture war stuff at the behest of Steve Bannon, who of course was extremely close to Donald Trump, and you could argue massively helped him get into the White House. Now, I just want to read this other article to show you how popular this guy really was for a time period, before we get into what eventually brought him down, an appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast. The troll who helped torment Leslie Jones of Twitter and landed a book deal. This summer, during the height of a vicious Ghostbusters backlash, comedian Leslie Jones took a break from Twitter in response to jeering tweets that targeted her race and her appearance, but Jones's hiatus didn't last long, partially because Twitter, in a rare move, banned the man using its service to lead the attacks against her. Now that man is making headlines again for landing a $250,000 memoir deal with Threshold Editions, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. It's one of the several ways that Yiannopoulos has parlayed a history of online abuse into a lucrative career. They said banning me from Twitter would finish me off. Just as I predicted, the opposite has happened. Did it hurt Madonna being banned from MTV in the 1990s? Did all the negative press hurt Donald Trump's chances of winning the election? Though he claims no credit for hacking and leaking Jones's personal information, did seemingly gloat over the invasion of her privacy. I met with the top execs at Simon & Schuster early in the year and spent half an hour trying to shock them with lewd jokes and outrageous opinions. I thought they were going to have me escorted from the building, but instead they offered me a wheelbarrow full of money. All the bigotry, racism, all the trolling, conservatives didn't care. What did conservatives care about? Well, he outed himself as a nonce on the Joe Rogan podcast, because as bad as conservatives are, they seemingly draw the line at this stuff. Sometimes, not if you're Donald Trump, but if you're Milo Yiannopoulos. Basically, to the people who were skeptical of him being a gay conservative, this proved all their theories about what being a gay person really is, and it's about being a predator to these people. So I'm going to play you the Joe Rogan clip, but just to frame it quickly, Vox reporting at the time. Milo Yiannopoulos finally went too far for conservatives. On Monday, he lost his book deal and speech at the 2017 CPAC, and he resigned from Breitbart. Over the weekend, it was revealed that Yiannopoulos was invited to give a speech at CPAC, the biggest mainstream conservative conference in America. That sparked a lot of outrage, particularly among the left, which pointed out that Yiannopoulos has a long history of being a bigot. But it wasn't liberals who got CPAC to pull the plug or Yiannopoulos to resign from Breitbart. Instead, the final straw was a video resurfaced by the conservative website Reagan Battalion, in which Yiannopoulos defended the idea of 13-year-olds having relationships with older men.
Was it after I'd lost my virginity? I was in my teens. I was in my teens.
14.
I was in my teens. Something like that.
That's what you said. I don't know how they rock it and marry old England.
I was in my teens.
Over here in my country, and fucking where you are right now,
You've never
America.
seen a 15-year-old girl at any point in your life, however old you were. You've never seen a 15-year-old girl you thought was hot.
Yeah, when I was 15.
No, when
Thought
you were
they were hot
25. When you were 25,
I'm not retarded, dude.
When you were 25, when you were 30, you will have seen girls about 15 you thought were hot.
No,
of course
I thought they were
you
little
did.
kids.
No, you didn't.
I thought, damn, she's gonna be hot.
So in response to this stuff, after the Joe Rogan clip surfaced, as to some of the specific claims being made, sometimes things tumble out of your mouth on these long late-night live streams when everyone is spitballing that are incompetently expressed or not what you intended. Nonetheless, I've reviewed the tapes that appeared last night in their proper full context, and I don't believe they say what is being reported. So being widely deplatformed and everyone on the internet finally hating you for these comments really made him almost totally irrelevant. Like, I don't even know how this guy made much money during, I guess, between 2017 and 2019. Now, we're going to get into the ex-gay part, but in between, he did appear in like various trolly sorts of things. Like, he was one of the leaders of the straight Pride Parade in 2019. I don't know how many of you guys remember that, but of course he was just like jumping on this opportunity, trying to be a contrarian and saying like, how can straight pride be hateful when me as a gay man is leading it? But then earlier this year he made his comeback as an ex-gay person. Now, before we get into the details of his comeback, here is him on a podcast describing what that kind of means, because it doesn't really seem like he's actually ex-gay when he says he's relapsed 2 times and had relationships with men while seemingly being ex-gay.
Are you really?
Not gonna mess in the first place.
Are you really straight? Please tell. Come on, be honest with us right now. Are you really straight?
I'm aspiring to straight.
You're aspiring. So you're trying.
I have slipped twice in a year, which is not too bad going.
No, that's not bad. If you did that, I'd say you quit weed.
Right, yeah.
You know, you're like, I quit weed. I smoked twice this year.
No,
Yeah,
I didn't smoke for
Birthday
50
and
days, and
Christmas,
before
yeah.
that it was 220 days. Okay, you're basically not a weed smoker anymore.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and no, so yeah.
So basically, Milo Yiannopoulos is using his religion and saying that being gay is essentially a sin, like no different from being an adulterer. And I'm gonna play you a video in a bit in which he says, like, no one is born this way, it's just like a sin, God didn't make adulterers, God didn't make gay people, and that's how he can like reform himself, and he believes there's a lot of different things that made him this way, and it's something he can just throw off. But even in that video, it shows you that he is having a tough time of being ex-gay, and during his time of being ex-gay, he's had 2 relationships with men and none with women. So this is when Milo came back into the spotlight, and Milo Yiannopoulos claims to be ex-gay. Anyone who's read me closely over the past decade must surely have seen this coming. I wasn't shy about dropping hints in my New York Times best-selling book Dangerous, and I heavily hinted I might be coming out as straight in the future. He said he was never wholly at home in the gay lifestyle and only leaned heavily into it in public because it drove liberals crazy to see a handsome, charismatic, intelligent gay man righteously celebrating conservative principles. He also likened being gay to being an alcoholic and the process of abstaining to recovery from addiction. As I've begun to risk sinful urges, I found myself drinking less, smoking less, you name it. I confess my weakness for designer shoes and handbags is yet to dissipate. Further bragging about material possessions, he said, the guy I live with has been demoted to housemate, which hasn't been easy for either of us. It helps that I can still just about afford to keep him in Givenchy and a new Porsche every year. So the guy he lives with, I presume, is his husband, because this guy has been married to a man. And it honestly seems like he's trolling a bit. You know, he's talking about handbags, he's talking about buying his flatmate like a Porsche. It doesn't really seem like he's being totally sincere here. But for him, it's just his latest grift. And he doesn't care how much that will damage other people. And we're going to get into that in a second, because this guy will just jump on anything that will make him money. He has political principles, yes, but he doesn't really care about them when he's faced with a financial opportunity. But it's not all just like funny and trolling, because it actually is pretty concerning, because what Catholics are going to do now in America is use Milo Yiannopoulos and say, well, here is a guy, look at him, he was gay married, he was all this stuff, and now he's reformed, and now he's ex-gay, and it's like being an alcoholic. He still struggles with it, but he's working on being straight and being closer to God and all that rubbish. So he actually gave an interview to the New York Post about this time he made his comeback as an ex-gay person. Milo Yiannopoulos to open conversion therapy facility in Florida. In an interview with the Post, the former Breitbart news editor revealed his plans to launch the reparative therapy clinic to help other people go through the same journey that I'm on myself, despite the lack of data showing the effectiveness of the exercise. Describing what he called a Christian renaissance occurring in the US, Yiannopoulos said fundraising for the effort was taken off considerably, citing a backlash against the establishment LGBTQ political activism. This has been the easiest thing to raise money for that I've ever done. There is an enormous demand for this among people who believe they've been led astray. It sounds silly to call it this, but you know the gay establishment. I think part of that is the resurgence of religious, socially conservative, kind of reactionary politics among noisy young conservatives, people who are kind of like DMing me now to ask, where do I send you the check? You know, like get me in your program. For those to suggest that reparative therapy is somehow damaging to people's self-esteem, it's so laughably preposterous, I don't take it seriously. Conversion therapy has a terrible reputation for precisely the reason that a lot of other things associated closely with either the religious right or the nationalist right have a terrible reputation. Because they've been lied about consistently and strategically for decades, we don't know very much for sure, but we have a relatively clear idea about a lot of it. But here's the thing, since the 80s and 90s, we haven't really been able to do any research that doesn't conform to the propaganda, because you cannot get funding for anything other than finding the gay gene, so we're operating in the grey area. My aspiration is to rebrand, revitalize, rehabilitate what they call conversion therapy for 2 new generations in the same way I obliterated feminism for 2 generations because it's dying, and horribly maligned, ridiculed, and prosecuted industry. It's an industry in crisis, but it's an industry whose addressable market has never been larger. So that stuff is like pretty concerning, because, you know, whatever you think of him, he does have like a large enough platform that you feel like this gives it some sort of credibility, although it is funny that seemingly everyone forgets he was like best pals with Richard Spencer. But overall, it's really, really sad to see someone who's obviously gone through something traumatic in his past maybe struggles with issues of identity in that he does seem to be a strong Catholic. The Catholic Church is very anti-LGBT generally. But I still do not believe that this guy, who is just so untrustworthy, just jumps on any trend for clout and money, is serious about this stuff. And of course, the context of it, if he wasn't deplatformed, if he wasn't outed as a nonce and stuff like that, he'd probably still have like a pretty stable platform somewhere. I doubt he would be going to do this type of thing. But it seems to me it's the only avenue where he can still make a stable income. And I'm going to play you a clip quickly. This is pretty hilarious. This is what he is now reduced to, selling like Mary statues on some Christian shopping channel.
And we've got today 3 items, all in celebration, reverence, of course, of the Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary. We're going to start with this wonderful statue, which we both own.
We do, but in different different colors.
That's right. You've got the silver finish,
yes,
and I've got this bronze finish. Tell us a little bit about the material this is made from, because it's a little bit special, isn't it? It looks like it's going to weigh a ton and cost $100 to ship.
And I want to make sure I have it right. So it's a cold cast, and it's hand painted bronze color, or you can get it in the pewter. Sometimes one or the other might be on back order, but they come in. It's very popular.
I'm astonished. It's called a polyresin, this material, and you can see, all the beautiful stars that are polished a slightly different color. I'm amazed by the level of detail they managed to get, like it was a bronze, like it was made of metal. It would cost, $100 to ship it to you if it was bronze.
Right.
So that is pretty hilarious, and also like well deserved for someone who was so instrumental in this awful far-right movement that really galvanized the far right in America, including obviously the election of Donald Trump. And obviously, just like with conversion stuff now, he jumped on Gamergate just for his own image. Something he didn't care about. He did not care about video games, but he did have these far-right politics. He did have these tendencies to try and build clout and fame. So that's why he did it. And that's why he's doing this Christian stuff right now. So there's actually like a longer form interview that he did with a guy called Eric Metaxas, who's another like American Christian conservative, in which he talks about all of this stuff. So I just want to play some clips for you now.
Be honest and say that the real, and I'll try to keep it as family friendly as I can, but the real driver for me was just the experience of committing certain acts in my private life that were not bringing me the kind of satisfaction that they used to, were not making me feel like they used to, and a growing awareness that this was some kind of papering over, that this was some kind of prophylactic or analgesic. There was something like that going on. There was something about it that felt like it was treating symptoms of something.
Now, perhaps this goes without saying, but I say it for my audience more than for you, that's the very definition biblically of sin, right? We do these things because rather than do the right thing, which is take the trouble to God for healing, we decide to mask it somehow.
Yeah.
And obviously, heterosexuals do that exactly as much as anyone else. So, but it's so interesting that you got to this point.
It wasn't so much a road to Damascus as a kind of gradual unveiling, or it felt like, sort of sheets of tracing paper were gradually kind of slipping off the table, to reveal the grain or something. And I was quite enthusiastically papering over, whatever it was, even to the point of getting quote unquote married to somebody. And I was well aware that was not a real marriage or religious whatever, but it was not in the eyes of God. But I did it, and I found somebody that I even blasphemously felt was bringing me closer to God, because he was enabling me to feel loved and to love, which had been a problem for me before. But unfortunately, that for him, I guess the journey that he started me on took me out of wanting to commit gay acts entirely.
So it sounds like then, if you are, a serious Christian and particularly Catholic, you buy into the idea, the biblical idea, that there's really no such thing as a gay person, that God doesn't create gay people.
The latest kind of psychology is suggesting that people are a bundle of competing drives and they can be characterized by what they do, but it doesn't define who they are, etc. Well, this reminds you of something, doesn't it? It reminds you very much, if you cast your mind back to school or to a church sermon, about what? Loving the sinner but hating the sin, separating what and who people are from the things that they do. So, no, there are no gay people.
So there you see him repeat some of the stuff he's been saying, that like being gay is just like a sin. It's not an actual thing, really. You can't be a gay person. You're just a straight person who's continually living in sin. He obviously like addresses being married to a man, but saying how his whole lifestyle, as Christians like to say it, made him unhappy, and even himself kind of like deluded himself, thinking that this marriage and being loved actually brought him closer to God. The one thing I will say after watching about like 40 minutes of this interview is that this guy could have had a career in acting, because to commit so hard to a grift, you can talk about this stuff very seriously for so long. I don't respect it, but I feel like it takes some acting talent, especially as you're trolling other people about living with your flatmate, probably still having a relationship with him because you said you've relapsed 2 times on that other podcast, and talking about buying him designer clothes and cars. I still think the troll is still subtly coming through even when he talks about all of this stuff. Obviously, I do not believe he thinks he's ex-gay, but let me know in the comments, do you think he does really resent the fact that he is gay because of some sort of Catholic guilt? Because a lot of Catholic denominations are really hard on this stuff, and so many Americans especially, I've heard Catholic guilt being thrown around so much more than I have in the UK. So that is the sad and hilarious fall of Milo Yiannopoulos, with the hint of this being quite depressing, how he's now using his platform to push something that has been so damaging to gay people around the world, and that he actually has experience with some sort of like trauma as well from the Catholic priesthood, and then still pushes this stuff, is pretty depressing. But in the comments, let me know, when were you first exposed to this guy? Do you remember his rise? Do you remember how popular he was? What's the worst thing he's ever said or done? Leave that down in the comments. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to join our communities, check out my Discord and my subreddit. And if you want to support my work, please check out my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.